Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Mirror Dungeon solo video. Today we'll be going from using one of the best space identities in the game to the one that I would consider to be the worst, Base Sinclair. What makes Sinclair so bad? Well, a lot of things. The first is the most obvious. He has some of the worst clash power out of any identity ever. His best skill is his skill 3, which rolls a maximum of 14, and his skill 2 rolls worse than his skill 1. In this run, I almost never use his skill 2 because of how bad it is. When it comes to soloing, his clash power can get slightly better if you have a lot of skill 3s. When he wins a clash with one, it gives him an attack power boost, and thus makes it easier for him to win subsequent clashes. Although with his low starting clash power, he needs a lot of skill 3s for it to reach any meaningful amount. Bad clash power, though, is the least of his problems. There are a lot of different ways to gain clash power in the Mirror Dungeon, making it pretty easy to work around. The real aspect that makes him so terrible is the fact that he is the single frailest identity in the entire game. At level 45, he has a max HP total of 153 and a -4 defense level. He cannot take a hit to save his life. Of course, he is not the only identity who has these stats, as he shares it with Base Otis. The difference between the two of them is that Otis is capable of dealing with her terrible stats thanks to having an evade. So what did Project Moon give Sinclair to compensate for his terrible stats? A counter, of course. Something that requires you to take a hit. I don't know what they were thinking either. Like, at the very least give him a guard skill so he doesn't instantly die when he inevitably can't clash. At the very least, he has a Rupture identity, and as such has a pretty decent boss killer in the Mirror Dungeon. But don't try to use him anywhere else because you will end up suffering. Anyway, to start the run off, we take Fluorescent Lamp and Barbed Lasso for our starting gifts and choose the Unloving for the first floor. We also managed to fuse Standard Duty Battery before making it to the boss against Baba Yaga. This is the single easiest floor in the entire Mirror Dungeon, and as such, the one that I tend to avoid the most. However, with Sinclair's terrible stats and a Pierce fatality, it's essentially a choice between this or the Automated Factory. Every other floor has a ton of Pierce skills, and with Sinclair also not having any of the right Sin types to activate our healing passives, we have no choice. Sinclair is capable of performing well in here thanks to the enemies here being weak to wrath damage. He does so well, in fact, that you can almost forget that he's one of the worst identities in the game.
제가 해낸 것 맞죠?
직원들이 개체
해보겠습니다. 해냈어요. 해냈어요.
이런 건 몽둥이가 약이지. 두드려 패.
해냈어요.
We take Thunder Branch for our reward, which absolutely hard carries us for the entire run, and receive Lithograph as a bonus before entering the Unconfronting for the next floor. Here we buy Imposed Weight, Phantom Pain, and Oracle before making it to the boss against Cromer. One of the greatest things Sinclair has going for him is having some of the best egos in the game for survivability. The problem with both Cavernous Wailing and Lantern is that Sinclair doesn't fuel either of them, and as such we are heavily reliant on resource-generating gifts to survive most encounters. This is only really a problem because the only source we have is Oracle, and with Lantern and Wailing consuming our Gluttony and Gloom resources, it's a real struggle to get anywhere. You basically get one use out of them per fight, and with Cromer requiring us to corrode, she deletes all of our resources. Outside of this, her fight itself is not really that challenging. Imposed Weight is more than enough to substitute our poor clash power, and Rupture can easily make short work of our former enemy.
늦으면 리피랑 먼저 갈 거야.
We take Crown of Roses for our reward and head into the Noon of Violet for the next floor. Here we find Hardship before making it to the boss against the Fruit of Understanding. Choosing this floor was the single biggest mistake I could have ever possibly done. This floor took me longer than the entire rest of the run combined. I had thought that because we weren't Blunt Fatal and had Hex Nail to become resistant to envy damage, this fight would have been pretty easy. I was a fool to underestimate how frail Sinclair is. He could not survive even a single turn without using Lantern to heal. If he ever got staggered, he would just die instantly, making our margin for error incredibly slim. The biggest problem I faced was the fact that I could get at most 2 uses of Lantern off in the first 3 turns, but I needed to use it 3 times in order to survive. The only other way I could possibly survive was by using Hex Nail on the first turn in order to become resistant to envy damage, and having the fruit roll at most 2 heads, otherwise I would get staggered. As soon as we made it to the 3rd turn, we could go the rest of the way easily thanks in part to one of the fruits self-detonating. After that, it's basically a free ride to the obelisk.
해보겠습니다. 제가 해낸 거 맞죠? 나무와 함께 베어 넘겨드리죠.
먼저 끝내고 돌아오는 친구는
해보겠습니다. 제 잘못이에요.
늑대가 배고파 있어.
The statue would normally be impossible for us to beat thanks to it being resistant to slash damage, but through the power of Rupture, anything is possible. This fight is basically on a timer. If you haven't staggered or killed the obelisk by the time 4 turns pass, it will use the skill Rushing Arms of Rest. This skill, while it doesn't necessarily kill you, does enough damage to always stagger and more or less guarantee death the next turn. With Rupture being the only way to beat this guy by the time this happens, it only stands to reason that Sinclair would try his best to sabotage us. The only reason we can build a Rupture stack in the first place is because of the ego gift Thunder Branch, which applies Rupture count every time we apply Rupture potency. Sinclair's skill 3 only applies Rupture if it rolls heads, so of course he rolls tails a single time, instantly killing the stack we've been building. Luckily, we had just enough damage that this didn't matter, and we managed to stagger the obelisk before it can insta-kill us, narrowly avoiding another hour of resets.
제가 해낸 거 맞죠?
저거 봐, 쟤 휘청거리고 있다.
해보겠습니다.
부위 하나가 끊어졌네요.
제가 해낸 거
이제 좀
맞죠?
수월해지겠어요. 중요한 조각이 떨어져 나갔으니
해보겠습니다.
저기
해보겠습니다. 해냈어요.
For our reward, we take Smokes and Wires and head into Rising Power Supply for the next floor. Here we buy Piece of a Relationship, Painkillers, Grand Welcome, and an extra skill 3, while also fusing Death Seeker and Smoking Gunpowder. For this boss, we're up against KQE.
해보겠습니다.
I needed an easy boss after the ordeal that was the last floor, and KQE decided to answer the call. He doesn't even get a chance to use his captivity, as Rupture is powerful enough to stagger him before he has a chance to do any real damage. The only thing that would make KQE a threat is if we were fatal to blunt damage. He does get us fairly close to stagger despite this, but unfortunately only having 3 skill slots is simply not enough.
그대들 기억하고 있지 않나? 그러면
해보겠습니다.
이거는 그다지 어려울 것도 없지 않겠는가?
제가 해낸 건 맞죠?
대체 상태가
해보겠습니다.
저희 직원들이 개체의 부위를 파괴했어요. 역시 미리 훈련하길 잘했죠?
깔끔하게 잘려나갔네요.
해보겠습니다.
완벽한 한방 시원한 걸.
해냈어요.
힘들게 딱콩 한 방 먹였어.
We take Burning Intellect for a reward and head into Abnormal Seismic Zone for the final floor. Here we buy Illusory Hunt before making it to the final boss against Papa Bongi. Could I have chosen a harder floor? Probably, but I was still shaken from the noon of Violet and just wanted the run to be over. Still though, any fight is a threat if you're as frail as Base Sinclair is. We're even 10 levels higher than normal thanks to Piece of a Relationship, and they still managed to do a ton of damage to us. If I had simply gotten slightly unluckier with the head chicken's rolls, they could have easily ended up staggering us. Painkillers would have been enough to enable us to survive, but still, this fight was closer than it probably should have been. The main reason it's not horrible is because the Papa is weak to envy damage, allowing our skill 3 to do a crazy amount of damage both normally and with Rupture. We do end up losing a few clashes here and there thanks to Sinclair's poor clash power, but we do eventually power through and manage to beat the chickens.
저 사람들
해보겠습니다. 제가 해낸 건 맞죠? 해냈어요.
본인이 방금 뭘 한 것인가? 엄청나게 강한 일격을.
해보겠습니다.
적합한 관리법이었어요. 다행히
제가 해낸 건 맞죠?
저대로 돌려보낼 생각은 아니시죠?
해보겠습니다.
뭘 잘못했는지 아는 것부터가 시작이 됐어.
해냈어요.
개체가 조금
해보겠습니다. 해냈어요. 해냈어요.
궤독은 아닐 거예요. 그래도 칭찬해 주셔서 감사해요, 관리자님. 그 순간 제 어머니가 생각났어요.
And that's how I soloed Mirror Dungeon 4 hard using only Base Sinclair. He is a genuinely awful identity who has virtually no redeeming characteristics whatsoever. At the very least, he's probably better at soloing than Talisman Sinclair is, but Talisman is capable of fueling Lantern, so it's honestly hard to say. Anyway, that's it from me. Like and subscribe to not miss next time where we'll be using this character. Goodbye!